Hello, everybody, and welcome to Streaming Media Advanced Forum, International Women's Day version. So I'm Peggy Daw. I'm one of the co-founders of Women in Streaming Media, and which is a group that was formed a few years ago out of a meetup at NAB to give women in the industry, in any role that they're playing, an opportunity to meet other women, network, participate in mentoring programs, et cetera, et cetera. We're really thankful to some of our allies, like Dom Robinson, who owns this podcast, and the folks over at StreamingMedia.com, the Streaming Video Alliance. You know, we want to promote women, but we can't do it without good friends. So we're really happy to be here. So we're going to have a really fun conversation today, just talk about all things streaming, just as happens on every single month's Streaming Media Advanced Forum podcast. So I'm going to ask the wonderful women who are with me to introduce themselves. And I guess, you know what, I'm going to use something I heard earlier today. Let's go alphabetically. So Alessandra, you're first. And you need to unmute. There you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, happy to be here. My name's Alessandra Madurowitz. I am Zype's Director of Business Development. Zype is an API-first video content management and distribution infrastructure. I am also the head of marketing communications for Women in Streaming Media. So super happy to be here, happy to represent the women of streaming media, and always looking to connect with other women in the industry as well.
Super. Christine, what's going on with you?
Hey there, this is Christine Geneva. I'm the Director of Customer Success for Bitmovin, and I'm based out of New York City. So Bitmovin is a video infrastructure provider. We provide tools for streaming, and thanks, Peggy, for inviting me to be here today. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Super. Welcome, Jessica.
Hi everyone, Jessica here. So I work for Peacock TV, which is NBC Universal's new streaming service that launched in 2020. And I work on the brand marketing partnerships team on the growth marketing department, and love women streaming media. Lisa on the call, who's I'm about to kick it to next, is actually my mentor that I was paired up with, match made in heaven. So excited to be here.
Aw, thanks, Jessica. So following that wonderful intro, my name is Lisa Spencer. I'm head of marketing at Irdetto. So we're a cybersecurity company, and we basically protect content streams, everything from glass to glass.
Super. So there's always something exciting going on in streaming media. And today actually is the launch of yet another streaming service, Paramount Plus, which I have not had time to check out because I've been too busy. But what do we think? You know, another streaming service, another opportunity, more content, that's great. But what do we think? Do you think they're going to be wildly successful? Do we think they're going to, or they're just going to get lost in the mix? What do we think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of skeptical personally. I think congratulations for coming to the party last. To be honest, you know, I think, you know, if I look at the ecosystem and the breadth of streaming services out there, my goodness, there's a ton. And I question what the differentiator may be. I mean, I know that they have already a base from CBS Access, and so they have, you know, a little bit of a following, but I think it's really, really hard, especially in these day and age, to differentiate yourself and pull people away from what they're already subscribing to. That's really tough. I mean, I wish them all the best of luck, and they do have some key compelling things potentially within North America. But yeah, I mean, we'll wait and see, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I think people have kind of a threshold. They don't want to subscribe to multiple services. So and I've done this recently myself too, is if I want to go online and try a different service, at the same time, I kind of want to cut somebody else loose, because I just don't want to keep adding and becoming more like a cable bill that, you know, we're used to from a long time ago. And I don't want to pay that kind of money on a monthly basis anymore.
Yeah, I noticed a friend of mine over at Vizio shared a really insightful kind of infographic of all the most popular services, what their monthly price is. And if you add up the most common services, and this is not even including now Paramount Plus, I think it comes out to like almost $60 a month. Yep. And I think you really have to love the content. Like $5 a month when you sign up, you're like, oh, whatever, I'll use my Face ID, throw it on my Apple bill, whatever. And then it starts to add up, and you're kind of like, wait, $60 for what? And I think it's not only, you know, a saturated market. I think people are realizing that they're spending a pretty penny on having maybe a show that they watch a season of and then they cancel. I think it kind of goes into Apple TVs. Like, how many subscribers do they really have? Do they have paying subscribers, or are they all free? And so coming to market with a paid model and not offering it for free, I don't know which one's better.
Yeah, and you know, with the launch of these platforms, and Disney Plus did this too, and was one of the early ones to do this, but you know, when you launch with a major telco provider and people already have internet, already have their phone plan or whatever, it's a little bit hard to say if it's because the streaming service itself is something that is so engaging and has all of these differentiators. And I personally am of the opinion that content is king. I think data is what actually drives the success and informs all the decisions, but I think to the consumer, content is king. And for example, we see this now with Discovery Plus, where you know, the 90-Day Fiance universe is really, really, really compelling. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I hope it's more so than just content, but also in the experience. And, you know, that's kind of what we really value and what my team, I think, has valued about Peacock, and love that we try to do things a little bit differently and have a little bit of a different voice.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, because when we were talking before, as we were prepping for this conversation, I've looked at each of these services and looked at, okay, this is really interesting. It's all about content, as you say. That's what attracts people to the services and whatnot. But if you're going to retain people in the services, I think a lot of it's around the user experience, and part of that user experience is the UI itself. And so I had these really huge, dreamy expectations of Disney, right? Because come on, let's think about it. Their creative folks are pretty amazing at the end of the day.
A little creative.
Yeah, just a little creative, right? And what they do with branding, right? And so that the branding of all of the different assets they had. So my thought was, okay, they're going to have the most amazing UI. That's going to be one of the things that's going to be really, really appealing and attractive about Disney, aside from just like the wealth of content, right? But at the end of the day, the UI was very consistent with every other streaming service out there. And I didn't think it would, I mean, other than branding it from the perspective, here's the Marvel universe and here's the Pixar universe and things like that, they didn't have fun. Peacock had fun, which actually is something that makes it a little more engaging. Like I haven't seen Paramount yet, so I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, they do have, what I like is that they have a range of content. They have a different range of content perhaps than some of the other streaming providers out there, just because of the whole Viacom, CBS universe and whatnot. So it's just interesting to say, how do you do that? But this idea of stacking services, like, you know, there are still people doing this linear, and linear is going streaming, especially here in the United States. All those local broadcast channels are going to be available streaming wise because of ATSC 3.0 and whatnot. So how much more do you get to stack?
Yeah. And building on what Christine was saying, I mean, there comes the time when it's, well, how much money am I saving if I have 5, 6, 7 subscriptions, right? I know that here in the Netherlands, if I'm paying about, I don't know, I want to say 60 euros or so for my internet. If I wanted an internet plus an all-in cable package with like all HBO, all the channels, it would be 90 euros. So it's only really 30 euros that I have to play with here, right? So
right.
I'm already a Netflix subscriber. I'm not going to subscribe to 7 others, because then the economics just don't make sense at that point. And, you know, kind of how many, you know, Ali, what you were saying is like how many people just kind of sign up and then they'll binge watch something and then their subscription. I was actually reading something today, which was really quite timely, and they did a survey, or they did a study, and this is based on the US. So, you know, it's, you know, although I assume probably global there, they would find some similarities, but the average consumer in the US has 1.5 subscriptions. 2 years ago, they had 1.25. So I think that really underpins the data underpins what we were saying, is that people, you know, they're not going to subscribe to all of these things. They're going to pick and choose. Content for sure is going to be king. And so that's a lot of competition that's coming out, fighting for those eyeballs right now. So differentiation is going to be key.
And another interesting thing, I was just reading an article about this too, is that some services like Netflix, who is the one that started all of this, they have a pretty strong retention rate. And so typically what we're seeing, and I saw some really interesting charts that were showing this, is that when these new services come on, for the most part, Netflix remains pretty much steady. Hulu, I think, was the next one up. That those are the two that remain pretty steady. It's the other ones, the other subscriptions that you have that are likely you're going to say, hey, I'm going to try Paramount Plus, so I'm going to knock out this one. But so it looks like the strongholds right now are with Hulu and Netflix, and then the other
really
spots
interesting
are
that it's Hulu too, because I've heard some disparaging comments about Hulu's user interface.
and I think it's Hulu as a part of Disney Plus. So let me add that on.
That's interesting too.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's what's important as well. And I think being in the industry, we can actually become very tunnel visioned into what this is, what that is, and what we think it should be, and all these streaming services. But I think once you start talking to friends, family outside of our little universe, I don't think there's as much adoption yet that we've even we're just at the tip of the iceberg. So I feel like, sure, they're, the last ones to the party, they're fashionably late to, the game in our world. But I think in the majority of the world, I don't know if everybody knows about, especially, Pluto TV. I taught my parents that they could, watch these channels for free. Peacock, I downloaded on their TV as well. But I do think that the whole fast ecosystem, linear, VOD to linear, the whole TV channel in a cloud, that experience that so much of the population is really accustomed to, it is really going to make a comeback when it comes to IP streaming. Samsung TV Plus is one of our partners, and I now say never underestimate something that comes pre-installed on someone's TV, because the usage numbers are out of this world compared to, vying for all the eyeballs and putting so much marketing spend behind your owned and operated service. Mm-hmm. It almost makes sense, no matter what size of a publisher or, broadcaster you are, if you have the content, put it on places that, another company is already spending, millions of dollars to get eyeballs there and make the ad revenue. I think the owned and operated OTT space is crowded from a vendor perspective. It's crowded from a service perspective. So there's going to be a bubble and there's going to be consolidation.
I think that you bring up the point of, do you want the walled garden and say, okay, I'm going to protect my content from anyone. So I can only watch Friends, I can't remember where Friends is, which is a whole nother conversation. I can't remember which shame on me. I can't remember which service. Is it Peacock?
It's HBO Max, actually.
It's HBO Max. Okay, thanks. I can't remember. But is the owner operated? But as you say, but you can go to Amazon and you can kind of aggregate your streaming services. You can go to Apple TV Plus and you can aggregate your services. You can go to Roku and aggregate and whatnot. So which is interesting, because you could get into this whole debate when it comes to aggregation, because I actually bridge both the traditional pay TV world, and well, at least you kind of do too, bridge the pay TV world and the streaming world. So, your pay TV provider has been aggregating for forever.
Yep.
They just started aggregating too much, right? And they didn't give us the consumer the flexibility which we like about the streaming services, because you can tap in and out of a streaming service. Yes, maybe it's kind of a pain in the neck, and it's we got to watch out what we're spending and watch our budgets and things like that. But you're not forced to have channels that you just don't care about.
Right. Yeah.
And it's that flexibility that we all really appreciate, about streaming. But there's in our chat room, there's somebody that's actually saying that that streaming is that there's so much new content every week, and we're seeing this more now, I think, even than we saw when Netflix first came to the forefront, is that they're all saying we have new content. So and it's either access to syndicated content, for lack of a better term, or it's original content. And the idea of taking the summer off, remember when there was never anything on in the summertime? If those of us who are old enough remember that summertime was kind of a quiet time for anything new on TV. Now that just doesn't exist anymore. There's new content persistently. And that just compounds the challenge of how do you know what service you want to subscribe to at any given point in time.
Yeah.
And that's super important to understand from like an endpoint perspective as well. I can have all these conversations about, the potential usage and ad revenue and, distribution endpoints like Samsung, Vizio, Zumo, like at all the O's. I think everyone in their streaming service has added a plus at the end, except for Peacock. And now all the, fast endpoints are all, adding an O or an E at the end. But I think what's really important and an interesting thing to think about is, okay, so you want to be across all platforms. You have the content, you want to get it everywhere and then it to be yours. But you have to then think about the demographic that then is the one with the Samsung TV. And then you have to think about the demographic that has the Vizio. And you kind of have to go down the chain or even start from bottom to top and understand, okay, well, who's going to want this content, and what devices do they most likely have? You can want to be across all platforms, but does all platforms make sense for your content?
So that's really interesting that you say that. So like that idea of being multi-screen, right? And having even just a user interface that works across multiple screens. What Peacock had to go through to make sure they were on the screens that they thought they had to be on was not a small task. Because one of my, I'm an independent consultant, but like my client has a sister company that does UIs, and I understand that developing a UI for, a Samsung and which version of Samsung, right? And which OS is on the that Samsung device or on your Apple device or on your Android devices and whatnot, that is a big challenge. And then you do have to integrate with technology like what Ardetto provides, and then all the different players. So, I mean, it's just, it's crazy complicated.
Oh yeah.
And not to mention like everyone coming onto the scene, and we had this thing as well, and we continue to have this, but getting it distributed across all of the major connected TV devices and smart TVs is definitely a challenge in its own. And I think each streamer does need to have their own philosophy of how they want to go about it. Like, Discovery Plus launched on every platform. We did not, and that was intentional, right? Like, I think something we often say, and our chairman Matt Strauss often says, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So we want to make sure that we're making the best decisions for Peacock. Like, we could, say yes to like any of the terms that any of these other services or distribution platforms are offering. Like, we could easily do that, and other people are doing that, but that's not what we see for ourselves in the long run. And I think that is so powerful. And I think that has been a big part of like our early success. And I think it's like more sustainable that way, if that makes sense.
Well, and this is it. I think everybody has to make their choices. And, so we're all talking about like the big, conglomerate based type streamers, right? I mean, Disney is a conglomerate, Comcast, NBC Universal is a conglomerate. Think about all the little niche players.
Yeah.
Broadway HD.
Don't sleep on the little guys.
Topic, right? Yeah. There's for every one really big guy, there's probably 10 niche providers, which keeps all of us in business.
The interesting thing I think about there, though, so indeed you have much more of a captive audience, right? And so that's great. So the churn is probably less, but I mean, I would argue that the cost of creating content, whether you're niche or whether you're big, is still the same. So unless you're like a BritBox that's funded by BBC and ITV and those guys, and you have kind of deep pockets from your parents, then how does that? I'd be curious to know if the level of original content or if the quality of that content differs because they're not getting the ARPU or the kind of streaming revenues that some of the bigger guys are, so they can invest a lot more into their content.
I think it's a really fair point. I think this whole thing about the cost of content doesn't matter who you are. It's huge. And then, so there's another question in the chat channel, which is actually kind of interesting, which is from a streaming perspective, are providers thinking about the seasonality of the content? Like, is there a summer hiatus anymore? Like,
well, not
personally, I don't think there is.
But
no, and even if you don't work for an SVOD or AVOD service, like you can see the way that content rolls out. Like, even whether it's a content acquisition of a series that used to be on air that someone else owned, there's no timeline around it, right? It's just whenever these deals get get completed. Maybe it's strategically around a certain time, but I don't even think seasons are a thing anymore unless it's like purely broadcast. I think I started to see this more, and I remember like early on I was learning about like unscripted TV, and they don't even have seasons. They're called cycles. So like I think that was like the beginning of it all, and now that we have streaming, it's just there's no form, because why, right? Like why does there need to be? Like you can produce.
I mean, the only thing I see is, and I noticed this with Netflix this year, is that they had Christmas or holiday season content, very much so.
Yeah,
that
makes sense.
Very, very Hallmark Channel.
Fun.
I mean, also, the holidays. I mean, everyone's at home, everyone's watching. That was one of our biggest usage days of the year. Was Christmas Day, for one of our customers who had a holiday focused channel. I mean, they were also, featured on the main page of an endpoint, and I mean, skyrocketing numbers that you would not expect, honestly, from like a holiday channel. That really did show in the numbers. So I think the niche content, the focused content, the seasonal content, I think that all puts into perspective, and it is important when you're programming content. When you're programming content for your SVOD or like for video on demand, that's one thing. When you're programming content that's a combination of VOD and live, which I also am curious to see if any of these streaming services, how they incorporate these live events. I think it heightens the importance of having a hybrid model of allowing some content to be gated while others to be accessible.
So I could argue that for live streaming, COVID was a good thing. Because it gave everybody, and all the technologies that needed to be developed around live streaming, it gave them an opportunity to kind of really advance their technologies without a lot of pressure, because what was happening live?
Yeah.
I mean, not for nothing.
It's also, I think, given even new business streams to some people, ironically, especially if you look at live sports, which you think is probably the hardest hit, right? Because they get a ton of their games. But now, I think it was just the PGA that announced a couple days ago that through, being able to move all of their production capabilities into the cloud instead of in physical environments, now they're able to offer all these different points of view from different tees. And I know the F1 has also done it as well. So, COVID it has kind of enabled really innovative companies to be able to be like, okay, here's the situation. How can we monetize this? How can we make this viewing experience better? That maybe had this not happened, they'd kind of rest their laurels on the old way of consumption. So it's interesting to see some of these new business models pop up and the technology that's enabling that too.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think the impact on technology. So, we were talking about live sports a little bit, and so I have a couple thoughts on that, right? So the first one is I was astonished in the United States by the NFL basically doubling what it was going to charge the broadcast channels, right? So NBC, ABC, all that. And of course, Disney said, no effing way. And negotiate, and apparently I did read something that they got it down to 30% increase, which is still astonishing. And so, and here again becomes the challenge, right? So they say they want that much more money. That's going to show, if you are still a pay TV subscriber, that's going to show up in your pay TV bill. If you are a streamer, so Amazon has had some NFL games, what's it going to cost? Are they going to have to modify their business model and say, this is not included in Prime. There's an extra charge per game, similar to what you saw like Disney and others do around having, since the movie theaters closed, so you can stream it, but you're gonna pay a one-time charge, which for a family, I mean, I actually had gotten to debates on LinkedIn about this because I'm single. I'm not gonna pay $30 to watch a movie at home.
Right.
If you're a family, that's a brilliant deal.
Yep.
That's way less costly than going to the cinema. So
but then it's also like, you're already paying for the service, not to mention multiple services. And it just feels like never ending, right? Like I personally, I think I have access to every service that's out there right now in some form. And some of it is through, something that I'm not paying for, to be completely honest. But I don't know. I haven't brought myself to pay for any of the extra stuff yet. I don't feel like, it's not going to be something that costs extra money forever. So I think, I don't need to see it like bad enough, for example.
So are we learning patience? Is that what it is?
I guess, yeah. I mean, it's with streaming, it's all instant gratification too, right? So like, it seems a little contradictory to me, and maybe this will change over time, but personally, I have not made that move at all yet. And I think it's great in the sports front, and not just like the big, content, like big pieces of content from these major studios and these big theatrical releases that would have happened in theaters. But, in live sports, I love that we have Premier League matches and WWE that's coming to Peacock, and it's all included in the, in your
monthly.
And you have, not to mention, 3 different options of depending on who you are and what you want to pay and like what you want to have access to. Like, I think that is, I'm much more like comforted that at least one streamer is like doing that. I would it would be quite overwhelming, I think, for everybody. Maybe other people feel the same way, to have to charge an extra fee for all of these special events and all of these special theatrical releases.
It kind of reminds me. Go ahead, please.
Sorry, well, from a consumer point of view, I totally get that, because I would hate to be like, oh yeah, I'm so excited to see this. Oh, but you need to pay an extra $5.99 or whatever. But I think that if we look at it from the content rights or the sports rights owner, the leagues themselves, they're not going to say, okay, BBC or whomever, I'm going to charge you $17 billion for these rights. But over here, I'll give it to you guys for free, because I want you to make sure that you bundle it in your package, right? So I think that the leagues themselves, they know how valuable their content is, and they're not going to give away for free, and they're not going to do different price points for whether it's streaming or whether it's, linear. Now, like if they go D2C, that's a different thing, and they can have their own channel. I think the F1 has their own channel, white labeled through some OTT platform or something, but that's an interesting business model. So from a consumer point of view, I totally get it. It would be frustrating to think you have this and then realize, no, it's extra. But I just don't see the leagues giving up their stranglehold on all that money to start giving stuff away.
I completely agree. I was just going to comment. It reminds me of the consumer almost experience of, again, to kind of take it in perspective of consumer behavior outside of just the streaming media industry and ecosystem. It reminds me of like with Postmates or Uber Eats or, Caviar, any of those delivery services that you're using. You think if you really want, like, I don't know why Five Guys is coming to mind. Maybe I need to get a burger for lunch, but if you really want that restaurant and you go through and you order it and you're already paying for the food, then you pay the tax, then you have to add a tip, and then they add some sort of service charge. Your $5 burger ends up being like $25.
Yep.
And you're like, well, that's frustrating, but I still really want the burger. It's a consumer behavior trend that, Raya, is the new Disney movie that just premiered today.
Oh, right.
And I'm a Disney Plus subscriber, but I think you have to have Premier Access. And I don't know if I have Premier Access of Disney Plus. But am I going to most likely pay for it because it comes out today because I really want to watch it? Yeah, but does it kind of suck from a user experience standpoint? Yes, But from a consumer behavior across industries, I think they know they can just tack on, and the likelihood that people are still going to purchase is pretty high.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. So when you look at all of this, I'm just thinking, Lisa, because you're kind of in this content security space. So when you start looking, especially at things like live sports and some of these premium, offers and whatnot, how does that impact, the content protection? Do you get extra questions? Is it more complicated to put that in place?
Yeah, it's funny. We were, all kind of the undercurrent through this conversation is back in the back of my mind. I'm thinking the pirates do it better. The pirates create all the content. They have incredible user interface, and it's cheap. It's super illegal and really awful. And we work day in, day out with law enforcement agencies across the globe to raids and pull these guys down and go to court on behalf of fighting against this. But there is something to be said that the pirates have figured it out. We need to, I guess, maybe as an industry work a little bit more collaboratively on that. But it's an interesting thing that we see more and more, and especially now in times of COVID, especially now that everything's going online, we're seeing piracy just becoming rampant. And you can Google, if you're Googling your shows because you don't know which platform to find it on, the piracy sites are going to be right up there along with the legitimate sites.
Sure.
My mom wouldn't know which one to click on. So it's a growing battle for sure.
No, and I think the increasing prices, I mean, so everybody's prices are going to be increasing because the cost of the content. So whether it's sports rights or whether it's the content, just entertainment content rights and whatnot, it's going to continue to increase. That's kind of a given. And so there is a point, like how much elasticity is there actually in the market, in the consumer wallet, to manage this, so that does that drive more piracy at the end of the day? And I think you can say, yeah, it is going to. So
definitely,
it's going to be up to, as an industry wide, to figure out what the answer is. Because I don't think you can pin it all on the content security folks. Like, because I've seen some of the things you guys have put out about this. I've read some of the stuff from NAGRA and some of the others and whatnot. I go, this is a big, complex animal.
Remarkable. It's remarkable, honestly.
It is.
What it's like.
Hey, Lisa, I'm just curious. Oh, sorry. Curious, Lisa, in those scenarios, how hard is it to get the content taken down? Like, what is that process like? How long does that take?
So it's actually not. It depends on the contracts and the deals that we have set up with certain customers. But it can happen if we identify the stream, it can happen immediately. So oftentimes what we'll do, especially what we've done in the past is, when there's pubs that are illegally streaming things, they bring a bunch of people, about 2 seconds before the match goes live, we'll cut it and say, sorry.
Oh, wow.
And then we can redirect to more legitimate sites and things like that. But once we identify the streams, it's instantaneous.
Yeah. Okay.
Interesting. Really interesting. So we mentioned data earlier. So this term of content is king. It's International Women's Day. Or almost. Do we really want to talk about content being king? Can we come up with another term?
Yes.
But I would say, if we're going to embrace that term, data is queen.
And queens rule.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the reasons from the content owner's point of view that direct to consumer is so appealing, right? There's always been, the supply chain was always disintermediated for the content owners because they had to go through a cable network or a broadcast network. They didn't have the data about the end user. They had Nielsen for ratings, but that's even only sampling and whatnot. So not really great. So now with direct to consumer, you get the data right away. But the big thing about data is you got to know what the question you're trying to get the answer to, so you get the right data. So what do we think is going to happen on the data front? I mean, there's just so much. I mean, we probably all come at it from different perspectives.
Yeah.
Just at like a base view, I feel like, I say content is king with a very big asterisk. Yes, it is. And I think from a consumer point of view, it definitely is. But you don't have anything as a direct consumer service if you don't have the tech, if you don't have the data. You don't have it. You don't have it. It doesn't matter how great your content is. If you don't have this information, you don't have any insight into this content, and maybe people can't even view the content if the tech is off, right? So I think just at a very base level, it's so much more than people think it is.
Right.
Yeah, and I think from my point of view, indeed, data is what fuels a lot of the business decisions, right? If you look at the Netflixes of the world, they have data on stats on every single thing, right? That rules them, which is great because that helps make meaningful business decisions in terms of what your subscribers are watching, so you know where to invest that kind of money. But I think the fragmentation, or I guess fragmentation is the wrong word. I think the proliferation of streaming services is actually lessening the quality of the data, because Netflix knows that I love watching murder shows because that's what I watch on their network. But then if I'm watching something on a different streaming service, because
they don't know that you
Netflix just thinks that, my God, if we make murder shows until the end of days, then we for sure have Lisa Spencer as a subscriber. But I'm maybe just watching that because that's the only thing that's on there. So I think the data is a little bit, I don't want to say false, but has to be interpreted based on the mind share or the eyeball share that you have per service, right?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So when you think about the data, so we think that's, we talk about the consumer data and whatnot. Christina, BitMovin, you guys are looking at data from a different perspective. Like
Yeah,
you
so
guys, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. So we have an analytics solution for our player, and that's monitoring QoS. So we want to make sure that, if something is going wrong in the playback experience, that can be pinpointed, and that, people can mediate that quickly, and so that we can right the situation. So good examples there are excessive buffering, or if the startup time is excessive, and these kinds of things tend to be irksome for the customers. And these are things that can lead to churn, or add to, if someone's already considering to leave, that it's going to help make that decision come true. So especially in this really competitive market, we want to make sure that the service is top notch, and that based on what the customer has identified are the most important factors that they're trying to deliver to their customers, that we're able to monitor that and give them the opportunity to step in and, right the situation if things are going the wrong way, equipped, of course, with the data that's going to let them to do that.
I think this is going to be one of the bigger challenges moving forward for streaming, is getting that. It's a holistic view from both what the consumer is watching, and what the experience is in getting the content to them. Because obviously there's a supply chain of technologies that are enabling this content, right? So when we have representatives of some of these different types of technologies here, and each of you can say what's going on with your technologies, but getting that holistic kind of integrated view of, all right, so what happens when we go from the delivery technologies from the encoding technologies to the delivery technologies to the protection to the players to this to that you can capture it all at different points, but I'm not seeing somebody provide that kind of integrated view. And then what does that mean for churn, right? So if you have too much buffering, so what's causing the buffering? So you got to go back and figure that out, right? Because multiple touch points again. And how much content did they want? Right. And so this gets into, so I'm sure Peacock is looking at, what are they watching? Are they staying? Do they watch the whole program? If they abandon the program, why do they abandon the program? Is it because of the technology, or is it because they didn't like the content, or is it because the phone rang, or a child is sick and you got disrupted from watching the rest of the program because of that, and you come back, maybe you come back later and you can track that, right? But all these pieces have to come into play so that a service can actually be viable long term. And I think this really matters a lot for the little guys. The big guys maybe have enough content and enough subscribers that they can kind of gloss over it a little bit. But it's something that kind of in my brain, I'm going, oh God, there's an opportunity there.
I think, yeah. And my perspective on that is I think that's why it's so important to have as extensive as APIs as possible, so that you can communicate with the other systems or the other, partners that the service is working with. So yes, the analytics that comes, into Zype's dashboard is a very small view of analytics. But the APIs give you so much more information. And yeah, a lot of the large services then have their internal development teams or their internal engineering teams that then take those, aggregate them into, some sort of internal data warehouse that they're using. And then they can effectively use all the information from their partners, really in a data scientist kind of role, to then study it. You can then even have like behavioral scientists then study kind of the behaviors on it. For the smaller guys, that's really hard because they don't probably have, the internal engineering data scientists, to dedicate to this. So I have seen there are a few, new-ish players in the market that are really exciting, specifically around subscription, understanding content, understanding, why they're clicking out, where they're clicking out, what content they go to, way more than just like a standard recommendation engine, like, Lisa, you were saying, is only one piece of whatever you think they might be wanted to be recommended. So I think there is an opportunity, like you said, Peggy, and there are some new players in it. Do I think they're going to be, everyone's going to come together over like the campfire and, hey, take all my data, you take all my data too, for the good of the customer. I would love to see that, but I just can't envision that happening, especially when things are so hot right now. And it's not closed doors, but you definitely have to keep knocking. But I think what we should all strive for as, vendors and partners and endpoints, is being as open as possible, creating some sort of standardization, creating, as open of a shared kind of communication across partners to, encourage services like that and to encourage data to be shared, for the smaller niche players.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think this comes into all of this stuff around data. It comes into for the streaming services themselves. Data helps them understand, how the content's being consumed. We know it helps them decide what to develop or what to acquire, one or the other. We've all heard the Netflix story for years about, House of Cards and how that ever came about, because they did the analytics on, people like Kevin Spacey and people like thrillers and people like, political stuff and everything. So, and it was a wildly successful series. And, and for a period of time, he was a very good spokesperson for them until other things happened. But I think I think there's some interesting challenges about having quality content. So quality across the board, again, it's the quality of the experience, it's the quality of the content itself. Because there's so much, we know how much is being spent. You see the numbers coming out, that the billions, and I'm not exaggerating, the billions of dollars.
There's no way around it.
Yeah.
Like, you either have the money or you don't. Like, there's no creative, at least not yet, like there's no creative solve there yet from my perspective. And, and like you said, it's hard to get like premium great content, and it's even harder to do that for free. Like, especially when people are not wanting to pay more and more, it's even harder to try to take up that little space in the big grid of all of the streaming services, of where you can get really great quality content and you can get it for free. Like, that is really, I think that's really hard to do.
Yeah.
And if you don't do it, you're pretty much out of the game, because somebody else is going to do it. So it's just, again, it feeds itself.
But that's why, a free service like, Pluto TV, which is part of Viacom, is so wildly successful, because it is free quality content, and they're just aggregating the content that, to be honest,
well, there's something about what you see on,
it's mostly archived content that's pre-produced. So they're not spending billions of dollars like Netflix is to create.
Well, they're kind of like
shows.
They're kind of like the syndication channel for streaming, right? So like it used to be, like, at least in the United States, you would go to USA or TBS, and you'd have your syndicated favorite programs. You can watch Friends and Seinfeld and whatnot forever, right? And I feel like you can do that with Pluto. And so some of that, so you could say that Pluto it's comfort TV, right? It's what's familiar to us. It's programs we know what to expect. Because we've watched those programs before, and we don't mind coming back to them. Yeah. At a different point in time, and it's generational for sure, and that's fair. That's fair. And I think we will see the same. Well, we are seeing the same things in the streaming services, because we know that there is a massive fan base for Friends and a massive fan base for The Office, and my niece is 14. And she is addicted to both of those programs, and she's very upset because she does not have a subscription to Peacock or to HBO Max. Mom and Dad might break down eventually, but not yet. So I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting
for sure, right? Because those shows, those comfort shows, or those shows that have mass followings or cult followings, with more and more streaming services coming out, people are not syndicating those shows to other services anymore, right? They're saying, we have our own, so we're going to take it back. Thank you very much. So again, the end consumer at the end of the day, like your niece and other people, are like, oh my God, can it not be on like one of these 4 services that I have? Right. But that's the only way to monetize it. It's again to have that content that everybody wants, that sets you up apart from the others. So a good thing for the industry? Probably not, because you're frustrating consumers yet again.
Yeah, the only way it works is if you're still stacking your pay TV plus your streaming services. You can still go to some of those aforementioned channels, and you go on in the evening, and there it is. Pick one of these big fan base programs, and you'll find it. You still won't find Game of Thrones anywhere else, but
I still think there is like a way to. I don't think it's black and white, right? I don't think it's either say NBC, Peacock takes back The Office, and it frustrates consumer, and that's that. Like, I feel like, you know, I think there's more ways to take back content in a way with the consumer in mind. Like, for example, The Office, we knew was going to be a big one, considering it's like the most streamed show ever, like on Netflix. And, you know, part of that is being comfort TV and people having the pleasure of like watching and watching and watching again, especially during a pandemic. But I don't think you can stop there. Like, just because we have it does not mean that everyone's going to come over, right? Like, I think people need to do more than that. Like, I personally have really enjoyed our superfan cuts. We have cuts of episodes, very famous episodes from The Office that are recut with brand new scenes that nobody has ever seen before. And, you know, I watched The Office through the whole like the entire series for the very first time last year, and you know, I was watching with my boyfriend who has seen the show a billion times. He's like The Office super fan. And when we watch the super fan episodes together, I'm always like, can you tell me when like a certain scene that comes up, it wasn't in the original version? And like, that was just so cool, because it's like, these fans know, like they watch these,
so and that's a new experience. And
yeah,
so
like I think that
really
is
good point.
Really fun.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I wasn't aware of that capability, or that had been done. So that is really fun. That's great. That's great. Hey, we're coming down into like kind of our last, you know, 10, 15 minutes and whatnot. And I wanted to talk, because we're here because you know, Women in Streaming Media has this great relationship with a lot of our streaming media pals and whatnot. So I do want to talk just a little bit about diversity. We all, you know, we know that this has been a male-dominated industry, but that we're all happy being here. We've all liked our experiences and whatnot. But Allie, you had shared some insight about some things that are going on with OTTX. I think it'd just be good for the general audience to understand what's going on, and, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something, as you know, being here representing, you know, women in streaming media is, yes, a core part of our mission is to increase diversity and leadership within streaming media. Obviously, historically, streaming media has been a very white male-dominated industry, and that's been the way it is for forever. We are making, you know, big strides, and I think a lot of companies made a lot of public statements saying we want to do better. And I do believe that the genuineness of those statements, you know, exists. And I think it's about having accountability in the industry and creating, you know, not to do with cancel culture, with, you know, supporting each other and helping each other. I think there's a lot of education that needs to happen. And sometimes people are scared to raise their hand. People are scared to ask questions. And so I think creating an open forum and a discussion to learn together, to hold each other accountable is really important. The guys over at OTTX had kind of started, I think it was just last week or so, was our first kind of OTTX for Change discussion. I can put it in the YouTube comment section here to share. It was really just the first one, opening introductions. I think we had about 20 people join, really from across large studios to, you know, from the production side of things to the technology side of things, male, female, and across all ethnicities and races. So it was really empowering to see and exciting to see, you know, people want to, you know, contribute in a way that makes tangible change instead of just talking about it. So, you know, we typically would be able to get together at, you know, IBC or NAB or CES. I admittedly miss those days so much. I can't believe I ever badmouthed being in Vegas Convention Center. But please take me to a Vegas Convention Center. I am ready for the dinners. Let's go. But I think for the time being, Zoom is really just the best forum, and we're able to get people together from, you know, all over the world. So like I said, it was really just the first one. I think it's about, you know, standing up and speaking out, sharing it on LinkedIn, you know, sharing what you see. And it's okay if you kind of mess up or if you say the wrong thing, and it's just about getting better and learning and doing it better next time. So I think in Women in Streaming Media, that's the environment that, you know, we strive to create. And I think we just need to create that similar safe environment across the industry. So I think it starts with us, but it's exciting to see that other organizations like OTTX are kind of stepping forward and hoping to kind of lead some actionable change as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. Yeah, I think so. One of the things that Women's Streaming Media is doing is we're trying to actually interact with lots of other organizations now. So like SEMTI is starting up a women's group specifically, and there's some a variety of different groups out there that are for women just across the media sector. We are one of many. So I think it's good for us to collaborate. I want to call out that, so we have a mentorship program, which I think is a really awesome program. It's one of the things that women are always looking for. They're looking for role models. They're looking for leaders, and they're looking to have people that they can chat with and kind of have, have a champion in their corner and be able to talk to about some of the difficult questions that everybody faces. And it's not, and I don't want to say that men don't face the same questions and whatnot, but women have often struggled to find people that they felt comfortable chatting with about some of the challenges they face in their day-to-day work lives and whatnot. And mentoring is a way to be able to talk about that and build your capabilities and whatnot. So actually on this call, we have a mentor and a mentee group here. Both Lisa and Jessica have worked together for like the last 6 months on a variety of different things. I have also been a mentor, and with my mentee, we have a webinar coming up on Monday on the actual International Women's Day called Demystifying Media Tech. And it's really about how do you attract more women into this sector? Because this sector is fun.
Yeah.
The technology is interesting. It's relatable. We all, like, what's so fun about this conversation today is that we're talking about stuff that's in everybody's home. And it's all the technology behind the scenes from A to Z. And we had a comment in the YouTube channel from a dad who's in the streaming sector, and his daughter is watching with him today, which is super cool. And she sees all these female faces. Every single one of us has been the only woman in the room.
Yeah. And that's you can't be what you can't see. And so it's so critical for everybody, not just women, but anybody. The whole point of diversity and inclusion is inclusion, right? So let's just bring more faces to the table, more people to the table, because what makes us different is what together makes us great. Want that diversity of thought, because if I think the same way as somebody else does, then one of us is redundant. So let's bring in more people, right?
Exactly.
Great, especially into I think, pretty small industry. I was on the phone the other day with someone who was a former customer who's now at this company, who's at this company. It's a small industry, and once you kind of get in it, you realize it is kind of like our little streaming media family. So once you get in, you understand. And I'm so grateful to have found women in streaming media. And now I think 2 or 3 years ago, Peggy, I had just randomly reached out.
Yeah, the group formed out of a meetup at NAB 3 years ago. And a few of us left that meetup going, wow, there is definitely an interest in having an ongoing conversation. So that was really the foundation of what we started as a group. And it will be nice to get back to the time when we can all be in places together and join in some meetups and take all the energy that has been in this call and put it back in a place where we're all together. Because our first meetup at a coffee cart outside of Hall 14 at IBC was pretty darn amazing. And then the last one that I went to was the one, Allie, that you put together in New York City. And it was a very cool bar. We're on the second floor, and it was just filled with women.
Can you imagine that? A full bar in New York City?
Awesome. Yeah, it was awesome.
The days, I know. I'm excited for that. I heard rumors that IBC is actually still on track to be happening this year.
They have a backup.
So I hear you. I think it's
backup date in December. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I know that. I'm like you. I'm like, it took a global pandemic for me to appreciate IBC, because
it's the one I actually miss IBC more than NAB. I have to admit, but that's just me, because I like to travel internationally.
Totally. And it's been so interesting. I kind of dabble in our marketing kind of efforts as well, specifically around, of course, business development, marketing. They're, kind of one and the same in some initiatives. And it has been really interesting as well to kind of see how these, either from a cloud infrastructure provider to an endpoint, to technology, or even the studios themselves, how they're doing these launches, how they're doing now virtual events. How do you make a virtual event more exciting than just, a Zoom meeting that everyone is, almost fatigued from? So I think across the board, I think our industry has really changed. We're lucky to be in one that has, come to the forefront. I've always said for the past year, I'm happy to be, selling video technology. If I wasn't selling video technology, it'd be alcohol or toilet paper, because it was a big year for us. So I think it's really exciting to see that we're at the forefront of kind of changing how people interact. And I think we have a responsibility, but it's also a chance to have fun with it and do something different, and try to stand out versus, everyone just sending emails on Zoom. So we're in front of our computers all day, but how do you stand out?
Yeah. Well, I think we're actually probably finishing a few minutes early, but I think we're going to call it a day. I think we've had a really fun conversation. I mean, if anybody does have some final comments they want to make, I'm wide open, but I just want to thank these great ladies for having a really fun conversation today. I can't wait to see you all in person again someday soon.
Yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity. I mean, I think it's interesting to see, if we have this conversation again next year and see who's left standing, right? I think that consolidation is going to happen at some point. So place your bets, ladies.
Yeah. Really.
Yep.
Right.
And I would, sorry, Allie. No, I was just going to say really quick. It's interesting because the pandemic, of course, forced us to innovate and find ways to continue and thrive under these conditions. But man, I cannot wait until we can have these face-to-face meetings again. I mean, with customers, with all of you and everything. So much looking forward to that.
Definitely.
All right. Then I guess we're going to call it a day.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.